Support for Conversations Live comes from the members of WPSU and from
Dick's Honda, serving Central Pennsylvania for 3 generations with quality Honda vehicles, service, and parts. On West College Avenue, State College, and at dickshonda.com.
In the United States, about 33% of young adults earn a 4-year college degree. President Obama wants to get that rate to 60% by 2020. But some say we place too much emphasis on a college education and that career and technical schools can provide another pathway to success. February is Career and Technical Education Month, and tonight our guests are here to take your questions on that subject. Our telephone number is 1-800-543-8242, and our email address is connect@wpsu.org. If you'd like to join us on Twitter, you can tweet a question to @WPSU and use the hashtag WPSU Conversations. Now let's meet our guests. Dr. David Passmore is a Distinguished Professor of Education and Operations Research in the Workforce Education and Development Program at Penn State. He's also the director of Penn State's Institute for Training and Development. Dr. Paul Starkey is the Vice President for Academic Affairs and Provost at Penn College of Technology in Williamsport. An affiliate of Penn State, Penn College offers certificate, associate, and baccalaureate degree programs in more than 100 fields of study. Thank you both so much for joining us.
Great to be here. Thank you for having us.
You know, for over a century, the United States had the highest rate of high school and college graduates in the world. No longer. What happened?
Well, Patty, that's a mix of reasons, I think, on that. And it's hard to sort them all out, but I think part of this is that we are in the United States experiencing an extension of childhood in many ways, and there's a lot of dependency still. Also, there's been kind of a degradation as we've gone along with the development of reading, math, analytical skills. And I think it gets to be difficult to compete with some of the outside forces that draw people away from school. So there's a whole mix of things that are going on here, and I think we've seen a kind of a general social change in that, and maybe a lack of preparation for the future.
Well, you said this extended childhood and dependency. To what extent would you attribute that to the Great Recession and that young people are getting a later start and so are at a disadvantage in a lot of ways in terms of lifetime earnings?
Well, obviously the recent recession has had an effect on the entire labor force and the economy. But I would say that this kind of trend preceded the recession. Maybe the recession exacerbated it. But I think this has been kind of a long-term secular trend in the degradation of the ability to get through school at that point. But obviously the recession has been an important factor in this. And it has degraded opportunities for people who are in the labor force and people trying to enter the labor force. And maybe people at home have a teenager or a young adult living in their basement at this point, and that may be the reason why right there.
And we want to get them out. So let's talk about some ways that we can help launch some young people into careers. You know, the Harvard Graduate School of Education issued a report several years ago called Pathways to Prosperity. And in it, they questioned this emphasis on a 4-year college degree as the only way to succeed. Tell us a little bit about the impetus for that report and what, if any, changes have resulted from it.
Well, there's a number of things that have changed based on that. You've seen, I think, an increased awareness of associate degrees or other types of education that can lead to very productive careers. You're starting to see some, I think, some folks who are being spokesperson for the alternate careers or for those mid-level jobs. You know, Mike Rowe has been a great spokesperson nationally for skilled labor and for applied technology-based careers. And so I think you are seeing a shift and an awareness that there are alternatives to a traditional 4-year college experience.
Patty, we had faculty member Ken Gray, who's now retired, who wrote a really great book. It was called Other Ways to Win. And
I interviewed him about that book.
and it really pointed out our obsession with thinking that college is the only way for social mobility. And I think historically what's happened is that is that it was at one point, when we finished World War II, we had the GI Bill and people entered that. It was a way to get social and economic mobility in the United States. And people really were fixated on that as a way to kind of intergenerationally move up in the world. But, you know, it's not the only way to get there.
But interestingly, though, there is still this almost snobbishness, I would say, that we have this bias against vocational and technical education and blue-collar jobs, and think that the professional and white-collar jobs are better. And so often these days, the incomes that they generate are not always that different.
Well, I have a little anecdote for you, and it's a Pennsylvania story. About 10 years ago, we had a project that was dealing with trying to encourage people to get into precision machining. At that time, there were probably 4 jobs for every person who was a precision machinist. And we had some people come in and give workshops for us. They brought in their W-4 forms, W-2 forms, and they had tremendous incomes as young people. We even had a precision machinist, a young person, fly her own jet in for this. So it's that sort of thing. So we spent a lot of time talking to counselors, to teachers, and we went all over the state to talk to this. And there was one time I was in a city in Pennsylvania, and we gave a talk about this, about great opportunities for this. And of course, a lot of these jobs, a lot of people have ideas that technical jobs are going to be dirty, repetitive, and aren't going to use kind of technical and math skills and things like that. Nothing could be further from the truth right now. So precision machinists work in clean areas. They do a lot of applied science and mathematics, and you know they really have some challenging kinds of things to do. And we talked about this quite a bit. And I had, after the session, somebody's grandmother came up and said, you know, I think precision machining is a great idea. What a wonderful opportunity. And her grandson was there with her, and I said, well, what's your grandson going to do? He said, he's going to go to school. He's going to get a college degree. And I said, well, you know, what are your thoughts about that? She said, well, I heard what you said.
But not for him.
But not for him, because when you get a college degree, nobody can take it away from you. And this is a person who was really looking at that whole intergenerational social mobility idea. And I said, well, they may not be able to take away that degree, but they may not pay you for the degree either. So that's something to consider. So I think it's really ingrained in a lot of schools, parents, grandparents, the people who influence young people to think about careers, is that, you know, you don't want to miss this opportunity for investing in this really important piece and not recognizing all of the opportunities that are available.
Well, the interesting thing about what you just said is that the pay boost from a college education is indisputable, but it's not indisputable if you're at the bottom 25% or if you picked a major that isn't marketable.
Exactly.
In fact, you're as well off or as bad off, however you want to look at it, as someone who has a high school diploma.
Exactly, and there's no doubt that there's a value in a college degree. There's a value in being a precision machinist. Why not join the two? Because that's then you get the best of both worlds. You're going to get those skills that you're talking about, those general education skills, and the ability to think, and the ability to communicate, and have analytical skills. You know, all technology is based on science, and all science is based on mathematics, and that's why you have to be able to understand those things to be an outstanding precision machinist, and that's what can lead you into those higher level skills and into the college degree, whether it's an associate degree or a baccalaureate.
But getting back to your example, I think a lot of parents are disappointed if what you want to be is a welder or an aviation mechanic, because they don't think it has the same status. To what extent is that a problem with technical degrees?
Well, this is a long and old problem. Career and technical education now is not our parents' career and technical education.
Right.
In fact, we only called it VOTech, not career and technical education.
And one of the things that occurred around, you know, when there was a lot of immigration in the country, career and technical education, vocational education at the time, was really thought to be a good way to Americanize people and get people going. And at that time, there was a lot of talk about sorting people out according to their probable destinies. And there was a lot of tracking that went on at that time. That doesn't occur anymore. It's not as though you walk down one road and can never come back. Most career paths now have a wide range of ideas. You want to be a precision machinist, you want to be an auto mechanic. There is a career path in which you can get advanced in other kinds of skills and make transitions. So it's no longer that kind of old notion that you either go one way or the other, you're a plumber or you're not. Things have changed quite a bit, so it's kind of more of an open entry and more of a career ladder idea.
Not
I think we see
exclusive.
that in a lot of your areas.
We do,
especially.
and we keep that idea of that ladder. You know,
Yeah.
that we're not training people for their first job, we're training them for their entire career, that whole arc of their career. And so that's important. And I think that's what helps us change the focus a little bit and change the stigma. You know, you're not going to be stuck in a repetitive job. You're not going to be stuck in one spot your entire career. And you have an opportunity to move through and move into managerial and move into you know, some very dynamic types of positions later in your career.
Well, speaking of not being stuck, you spent 20 years in a conventional 4-year university setting.
I did.
What made you make a move to an applied technology institution like Penn College of Technology?
Well, you know, Penn College is a really unique place. It's and that's what made me move. You know, the ability to work with somebody like David Gilmour, my president, and to have an opportunity to affect change. We go at a very rapid pace. Over the last 4 years, we've introduced 14 new programs. And to be able to do that and to be able to reshape things is just thrilling. And that's what technology is about. It's what applied technology is about.
Well, what determines, you said you just created 14 new programs. What's the thinking at Penn College? How do you say we're going to eliminate this program and introduce this one?
Right. A lot of it is based on the trends. We have very tight ties to employers. We have advisory boards on all of our programs, and they meet very regularly. And so they tell us, they advise us on what's going to be changing in terms of employment. What are the new things coming? And then we do some basic research. I mean, we look, you know, beyond what is current employment. What are the things? What's that emerging technology that's going to be you know, shaping the future? And so we try to prepare for that. So we do really good homework, and then we act very rapidly on bringing that homework to fruition and bringing those programs to you know, to introduction.
The majority of jobs today don't require, David Passmore, a 4-year college degree. So what is required, and what's going to be required in the future?
Well, I think that that this is a really difficult thing for everyone to sort out. You know, we have employment projections that go 10 years out on this that are done by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and they give us some interesting trends. So, for instance, if you were to look at those numbers, you would say, I have a few numbers here. There's supposed to be a 14% increase in employment between 2010 and 2020, but there are 4 occupations in which there will be an increase of 500,000 workers.
Healthcare.
And you hit it right on the head. That's a Pennsylvania story, too. We're talking about registered nurses, home health aides, personal care aides, and also retail salespersons in there. So, and there are lots of, I think only about 75 declining occupations. They're all going to improve in somewhat, but they're big areas. Now, a lot of the areas where there is an increasing demand does not require a lot of additional education. As a matter of fact, a lot of the opportunities are going to be in areas where there are where there is going to be some post-secondary education or advanced training that's involved.
But not necessarily a 4-year degree.
Yeah. So, and it's really interesting when you look at what kids want and what jobs will be in the future. It's really, there's a disjunction there. This is the whole reason we need to really think about what you invest your time in doing. So, for instance, there are lots of, a high percentage of kids who decide that they want to go to college, yet there are fewer jobs that will require a college degree than those people in 9th grade who aspire to go to college. Also, there are relatively few kids who see post-secondary training less than a baccalaureate degree or advanced training kinds of activities as being important. Yet about 65% of the jobs in the future are going to require that level of training. And the other tragedy in all this is that there are probably about 40% of students who exit high school who don't either have the basic skills that are going to be needed in the future or drop out altogether. And in the economy, there are very few places for people who don't have skills in the future.
I want to follow up on that in just a moment. But if you're just joining us, I'm Patty Satali, and this is Conversations Live, Career and Vocational Education on WPSU TV, WPSU FM, and WQLN TV in Erie. Our guests tonight are Dr. David Passmore, Distinguished Professor in the Workforce Education and Development Program at Penn State, and Dr. Paul Starkey, Vice President for Academic Affairs and Provost at Penn College of Technology in Williamsport. Our telephone number is 1-800-543-8242, and our panelists are ready to take your phone calls. If you'd prefer to email us, our address is connect@wpsu.org. You can also join us on Twitter. Find us under the address @WPSU and use the hashtag WPSU Conversations. You mentioned dropping out, and the Department of Education is proud that 80% of Americans graduate from high school. But of the 20% who do drop out, the majority of them, more than 80% of them, say that if school had been more relevant, if it had been more hands-on in teaching me a skill, I wouldn't have dropped out.
Yeah.
Wow,
This is a really interesting idea from the group that's dropping out, because over the years, there's been a variety of research pieces to look at career and technical education, not so much as skill development, but as a good way of having instruction. So for instance, rather than looking abstractly at geometry or trigonometry, it makes a lot more sense to kids when they have to figure out the slope of that roof, and they realize that they're going to have to be able to calculate or estimate it. And they're kind of
relevance here.
There's, I would say that there are probably a lot of kids who not interested in physics, not interested in math, not interested in chemistry, but when you give them a chance to work on an automobile, all of a sudden chemistry, math, and other kinds of things become relevant.
They don't
and
even
necessary.
right.
Yeah.
You know, I love something that Penn College of Technology just celebrated your 100th anniversary, and there's the booklet that came out, and it's called Working Class, sort of a double entendre. What you're providing is working class, hands-on work, and also this respect for working class professions.
Yeah, that's our mission. You know, we are committed to a hands-on applied technology education, and we try to engage our students from day one. The first day, my first semester at Penn College, I went out to the welding shop, and the dean there, I asked him, I said, when will the students, this is day one, how quickly will they get in the shop? And he said, at 9 o'clock this morning. We had a 1-hour safety class, and then they started, shooting arcs and sparks. Yeah. And so so that's part of what we do, is we try to get them engaged. And you talked about it, engaging and letting the students see where it's relevant, and letting them see very quickly that they can make things change, they can make things happen by their actions. And that makes the mathematics and the science and the communication skills more relevant to them, because they can see how how they use it, how they put it into action.
And I think part of this is, as I said before, is the separation of youth from adulthood. Okay, when you don't have a chance to see what you can do and how it's used, you're kind of in a youthful limbo. I would say, all the time. The idea that you get a chance to have experience and see some realistic things, I think, are really important.
Well, one of the things that interests me as a woman is that, and for you as the co-chair for the Commission for Women, is that 70% of the people who attend an applied technology institution like Penn College are men. Only 30% are women. Why is that?
They are, and there's still a division. There's still a little bit of, gender bias or gender stigma there, and so we do see men moving into what have been traditionally male-dominated jobs. But we also try to counter that. Both at Penn College and other places, we try to expose both men and women at a very young age to alternatives. Penn College has a program called Smart Girls that focuses on middle school, high school young ladies, brings them in and exposes them to some of those careers like engineering, design, technology, or to machining, and say, it's not just for guys. There's a lot of opportunities here.
And fantastic job placement.
Absolutely.
Okay, we'll talk about that in a minute, but I'm going to take this phone call. We have David calling us from Hollidaysburg. David, what's your question?
Patty, my question is, as a Penn State alumnus in history and political science, Penn College, that one of the professors that you have on there is from there. My question is Penn College still promoting the vocational ed degree factor as it did before it became Penn State?
David, tell me a little bit more of what you mean by vocational.
Well, like if you're preparing people for in the line of carpentry, in the line of auto mechanics.
We do, yes. We do.
100 different programs.
We do. We've got 100 different programs. All of them are focused on applied technology. And many of those traditional programs that David mentions, our automotive program. We do have welding. We have aviation. We have machining. We have
construction.
We have residential construction. We have construction management. We have healthcare. We've got a ton
which is your number one
programs.
most popular is healthcare, which is good
healthcare.
since you said it's where the jobs are going to be.
But we have those both at the traditional focus of an introduction to automotive, but we also have a baccalaureate degree in automotive, one of the few in the country. We've got one of only.
Explain what that means. And I'm curious about a couple of things, because you can take nursing at Penn State University Park. You can also study nursing at Penn College. So what's the difference? Yeah. Now,
the nursing is going to be a little more traditional. It's because nursing education is the accreditation requires it to be pretty explicit, but the automotive is very, very different. So our automotive students in an associate degree are going to focus on the technical work, on being a technician, but the baccalaureate is going to be focused much more on the management of that enterprise, or the management of a shop.
So they understand how the Ford dealerships repair shop works.
Exactly.
Functions.
And so, and it's also available by distance. So that technician who graduates in 2 years and is moving through their career, that gives them an opportunity to pursue the baccalaureate degree, which is going to be a little more conceptual, and it's going to be a little more managerial oriented, and it's going to be at a higher level skill, that allows them to again continue through that career arc.
All right, we're going to go to Ken, who is calling us from State College. What's your question, Ken?
Yes, good evening. Thank you for taking my call. I was very fortunate. My degree was liberal arts, and I was very fortunate to have quite a varied business background in terms of a professional career. And I'm wondering if the future is going to provide those opportunities both for college-bound and non-college-bound vocational education students, where they will have a variety of fields that they might or should prepare themselves for, or should they head for specialized areas?
Good question. David Passmore.
I think this is the tricky balance in all of this. Remember that when you go to work in a job that requires particular skills. And so people shouldn't be cautious about preparing to go to work for jobs that exist today. But I guarantee those jobs will change. And they might change quickly in the matter of a couple of years. So what's really important, I'm glad that we heard some information about the liberal arts, because really what it takes is the ability to transfer activity and to learn more, because the word right now is there will be lifelong learning. Nothing's going to stay the same. So you got to get prepared to get into work, and you got to find something that you like. And there's one definition of a really good work is that it takes skills that you have and puts them to use in things that people need. And when you find that, I think you find some happiness. But along the way, you've got to get in, find that thing, and then be prepared to grow. Nothing's going to stay the same.
We need to stay relevant. You know, our skill set needs to stay relevant.
David hits on a critical thing. It's that ability to renew yourself, and to stay on the cutting edge, and to make make the changes in your own career that's going to keep you viable and keep you moving through that career.
Let's look at a little data, okay? And this, I think, for people out there right now who are thinking, the people who are helping young people think their way through how to invest in careers and are encouraging them, I want you to think of one thing. Manpower Group, which is a research group, in 2013 found that 40% of employers are having a hard time.
I read it was 52%
filling
from
skilled
Manpower,
trades. And so there's really there's a skill gap that's going on now. You know, even though we know that, we talk about this all the time. We're reading things more and more in the public, in the press about these kinds of things. There's some interesting data about this. So I took a look at a research study that was done with high school students to see what they think about work in the future. And it's interesting. Only 6% of the students who responded to this survey were interested in skilled trades at all, even though they knew the demand was high. And some of the reasons, they said, well, skilled trades don't interest them. About half of them said that. They also believe that there are no opportunities in skilled trades. That's not true, okay? And also, they don't view the skilled trades as being cool, okay? And also, they think skilled trades are old-fashioned. They think that working in an office has more prestige than working on the job and working out there. And so that's not quite matched with the reality in terms of demand and pay. So that's a big disjunction. And I think one of the interesting things about this, though, is that this is amenable to change. One of the things we know from this study also is that any student who's had the opportunity to take a career and technical education course in high school has a more favorable attitude toward the skilled trades. And so there's a kind of an experience with that that's important. The other thing is that we find that students who go through career and technology education seem to have a better realistic idea about what work will do. You know, a lot of us pick work because of fanciful notions about what we're going to be doing, how we're going to get paid, but career and technical education students tend to have a pretty good idea of what that realism is in the market.
Well, there are some who say that high school students don't get the exposure that you just described because so many high schools aren't encouraging their students to seek out the technical opportunities, you know, the vo-tech opportunities in their school. In part, they say, because if you go to the vo-tech part, we might lose a teacher's position, so it's job protection. Is that a valid problem?
Well, it may be. It may be. I don't know exactly on that, whether the embargo that we have on realism in this is due to the fact that we have people trying to protect jobs. In the long run, that disintegrates. That disintegrates. It may not be this year or next year, but this will kind of reach an equilibrium on that. I think that the thing that is really important is that people need to be thinking about this kind of career planning when they're young.
So 6th grade.
I think exploring,
K through 6, we all have about the same education.
There are many schools that provide opportunities for job shadowing and all kinds of activities that get you out there and you see what things are like. Maybe you want to be a physician. Take a look at what a physician does every day. Maybe you want to be a welder. Go out and see what people do. This is going to help out quite a bit.
And we are seeing a shift in the high schools and in the career and technical centers. They're trying to expose students much more thoroughly to to what alternatives are there. So we are seeing those counselors who are tremendously overworked. They've got so many options to expose their students to, but they're doing a really good job. And the more they know about that applied technology education or that applied technology track, the more likely they are to take even their best and brightest and say, this may be a good opportunity for you.
So even though you may be smart enough to become a medical doctor, if your real interest or passion is something else,
absolutely, if it's welding and engineering, and then that's where you need to apply that, and that's where you're going to be happy, and that's where you're going to be productive, and that's where you're going to get a good job.
And then I want to go to a tweet. Okay,
well, you may perceive that there are separate routes. So, for instance, we have career and technical education schools and the like. But I think if you were to look at the enrollments, you'd see that there's probably quite a bit of cross-enrollment because there are many students who classify themselves as college-bound, are really eager to take the electronics course or other kinds of things that might, get them ready for an engineering degree. So there's probably a lot of cross-fertilization that goes on there.
So we have a tweet I'd like to go to. This one, I wish my learning disabled adult child could get help with learning a productive trade or job. Dr. Starkey, any response to that viewer?
There are programs available for folks at all levels of ability. We're lucky enough in the Williamsport area to have Hope Enterprises, which focuses just on that, and it may not be the same. It may not be the same job that my students are preparing for, but there are programs that can, for folks of many different levels of ability, to find ways to be productive and to move into a level of independence, just depending on what that level of ability is.
You mentioned a moment ago, Dr. Passmore, that Manpower came up with this figure of, 42% of the employers don't have the skilled labor that they need for positions that exist. And I thought that was interesting because in the 90s, when you looked at a place like Silicon Valley, only 10% of the people who went to work there actually had training in IT. The rest was on-the-job training. And so I'm kind of curious to know, don't employers today feel some responsibility to provide some on-the-job training?
I believe they do. We just recently did some analysis in the construction industry, and even though a lot of the figures that you describe are out there, I think a lot of employers are kind of moving toward the idea more that they need to provide opportunities for training that kind of go beyond the night school, weekend kind of activity. So there's a lot more investment that's going on in training. People realize that needs to be part of the job too. And in a lot of areas, now you even talked about Silicon Valley, it's very difficult, I would think, at a computer terminal to blow yourself up or kill the people around you or drive your vehicle into the wall and other kinds of things. So there are a lot of really important things that people need to learn about work that go beyond, for instance, coding and that. So there's really a lot of safety activity. There's a kind of general teamwork that's involved, and the ability to use all the tools and materials and the capital that's involved. So although it's true that people could sit down and learn coding, it might be difficult to learn how to be, let's say, a Boilermaker by just sitting and looking at a book.
The decisions that parents and their kids make about post-secondary education is becoming more and more critical as we look at student loan debt, as we look at defaults on student loans, as we look at people who have four-year college degrees in something that didn't lead to a position in their waiting tables or bartending.
Or underemployed. Sure.
So, this makes career counseling so much more important than it's ever been, and I'm just wondering how good it is and what sorts of questions should parents and students be asking themselves to make the right decision.
Yeah, we need to tell our students, whether as a parent or whether it's as an educator, we need to tell them, yes, pursue your dream, but pursue your dream where you can be productive. But going out and finding yourself doesn't always pay very well. And so, I want students to be pursuing things that make them happy, but I also want them to be doing things that are going to be worthwhile. It's going to be where you're going to have an employer who's going to be willing to put you on the payroll to do so.
I think that how you start your investment in your career is really important. There are lots of kind of costs that are associated with that. Once you sink some of those costs into the wrong area and you've made a mistake or you delay or you decide that you need to take another degree, you've really added to the debt that you have, and you're getting a slow start. We did some research on some of this, and there's a certain number of students, college graduates, we call refreshers. I'm sure you see them at Penn College.
They come back every couple of years?
They not only come back, they come to
Yeah.
Penn College because they went through a degree program and they were really excited about learning the things that they did, but they didn't really think about how those were going to be used in the market. Then they come back and say, I got to get a job. I got to pay back my debt. I'm going to invest.
Or they say, that's not my passion. I went through a traditional college program, but I really want to cook. You know, and so they come to a culinary program, or they say, I really want to be an engineer, you know, or I want to go into engineering design technology, or I want to be an architect.
And often in situations like that, where so many of the technical degrees are so specific, if you change your mind, you very likely will have to start all over again. There aren't going to be credits that transfer.
Well, we do try to make sure that we are able to bring as many as possible, but we also encourage our students to make up their mind pretty quickly. Our students don't change majors often, or if they do, they're moving from one level. A lot of our students move from an associate degree level to a baccalaureate level. And so it's important to be able to create those types of ladders there so that students can move, shift a little bit as opposed to completely changing their focus. Students who have an aptitude for applied technology tend to stay pretty focused. They don't change their major. And once they've locked in on what that passion is, they stay focused on that.
Yeah.
If you're just joining us, I'm Patty Satalia, and this is Conversations Live, Career and Vocational Education on WPSU TV, WPSU FM, and WQLN TV in Erie. Our guests tonight are Dr. David Passmore, Distinguished Professor in the Workforce Education and Development Program at Penn State, and Dr. Paul Starkey, Vice President for Academic Affairs and Provost at Penn College of Technology in Williamsport. Our telephone number is 1-800-543-8242. And we are ready to take your call. We'll go now to Sandra, who's calling us from Georgia. Georgia, the state Georgia?
Yeah, the state of Georgia.
All right. Well, hello, Sandra. Thanks for calling. What's your question?
Hi. I have a question in reference, and I like the guest thoughts on, let's say you have a retiring registered nurse. And I did hear that they have a nursing program, but let's say you're not a retiring registered nurse. You have a nurse that completed an associate degree with some kind of leftover baccalaureate credits that she didn't complete because she went out to do some entrepreneurial things, some corporate sales within nursing field, and gained a lot of extracurricular experiences, if you will. And at this point, at 60, turning 60, still not ready to retire, but is not really interested in going back to finish up those few credits, but would like to know what could be a good career path now. And if they have something in the school where they have people like herself to come back and mentor oncoming nursing students to a broader perspective of using all the skills that they've obtained in their nursing curriculums to use in the marketplace. More of a entrepreneurial type of setting, because I find that nurses, especially coming out, they're so stuck on the traditional bedside care and not willing to utilize all those skills that they have learned within that nursing curriculum to do things outside.
Before our guests feel that, I'm just going to say that someone with the kind of skills you're talking about, the need for home care is absolutely exploding, and as we age, I don't know how we'll actually supply the workers that we need. But how would you answer her question?
Well, you know, there's a lot of opportunities, and schools like Penn College often will create opportunities for students to move from one career area into another. For instance, we have a program we call Applied Management, and it's a 2+2. So if somebody has that associate degree,
sounds like she doesn't want to go back to school though.
But that could be really important, and it's an opportunity that a lot of schools like Penn College will make that a degree available online, so that you can pursue it from a distance. You can pursue it from Georgia. But it's also important to be able to, to apply that passion, to apply that experience in a lot of different areas. It's interesting, she had mentioned something about, our caller mentioned something about being able to mentor our students, and that is critical, being able to put our students in, whether it's in a clinical situation or whether it's simply in a shadowing, like our other guest mentioned a little while ago, so that they can get an idea of what it's really going to be like.
To do this job.
Yep, to do this
It's interesting that the caller, I think the caller said that talked about being 60 years old.
And not ready to retire.
No one's ready to retire. As a matter of fact, if you look at the data about our population, First of all, Pennsylvania has one of the, kind of on the average age, one of the older populations. And also, if you look at population changes between 2010 and 2020, we're going to have a big increase in the older population. And as a matter of fact, if you look at labor force participation rates, the one group that is expected to increase its labor force participation is 55 plus. And the other age groups are going to decline. So there's a lot of interest in being healthy, having opportunities, and 60s is not out of the game.
And every 8 minutes, another
I know that.
one.
I'm 68.
And every 8 minutes, I think another one of us turns 65. So,
gosh.
So I guess I would like you to kind of define what constitutes today a good education, and I'll begin with you, Dr. Starkey.
What constitutes good education is being able to pursue your passion, being able to pursue your passion in a way that you are going to be productive, and in a way that you can renew yourself. So if your education prepares you for that, if your education prepares you for both that first job and that second job and that whole career, and gives you the skills to be able to think, to be able to use quantitative skills, to be able to research and to be able to communicate, all those things that are part of our basic general education core, that basic liberal arts. You know, it's part of what college is about. And we have that as part of, part of any good education is going to be able to let you renew yourself.
You know, what we don't have that we have in Scandinavian countries and in European countries, but especially Scandinavian countries, is this robust internship and apprenticeship. Students are, hands-on, and they are being encouraged. I think 45% in Scandinavian countries are pursuing the technical track. And in those countries, the unemployment among youth is much lower, in Finland and Norway. And I'm wondering if we should be taking a page out of their book, Dr. Passmore.
Well, I think this is continuing with our story of the need to have experience and having reality. If you want to sit in a classroom and study some things and read about it, that's very useful. But on the other hand, experiencing it is important. This is what I think really not only increases the human capital that's being developed, but also it puts young people closely in contact with actual workers and actual employers who can mentor them and also can evaluate them and make the transition between being young and being an adult work much better. And apprenticeships are very heavily used in European countries. There are apprenticeships for a lot of occupations that, for instance, even cashiers. So there's a lot of mentoring and transition that goes on. They may be at lower wages, but they provide the opportunity for close integration in the labor market.
And the European model does have that. It values that, and it pays those. Even the brand new employer will pay them both for that apprenticeship, the time on job, but we'll also pay them for the time in class. And that's a little bit different. A traditional apprenticeship in the U.S. is you go to work and you shadow the work. And the European model has that it also has that educational component, the classroom component or the laboratory component, as well as the actual work.
And the vocational and technical part is well funded in a lot of those countries.
It is.
Where it's not as well funded here.
It is. I think we're seeing a shift towards more hands-on education, hands-on applied education, whether it's in an internship or in apprenticeships. Apprenticeships are a little bit different, but you see a lot of even traditional college programs have that emphasis or encouraging and sometimes requiring that internship so that student, whether they're majoring in culinary arts or whether they're majoring in business management, they're going to have experience that's marketable, that's valuable, that's real when they finish.
Okay. I'm going to hold that thought if you would. I'm going to go to Marilyn, who is calling us from State College. What's your question, please, Marilyn? You there?
Patty?
Hi.
I have to listen to this.
Yeah, actually, turn your radio or television down and then ask us your question.
Okay. I
Yeah, we're getting feedback from your TV. If you just turn that down, we're ready to...
I have that off now.
Okay, all right.
Patty, this is Marilyn Mazza calling from State College.
Oh, hi.
Wow.
And I have enjoyed the show, and I think it's so important. And I just wanted to add that I believe there is a whole generation of women in particular in State College area that probably are ready to go back to work again after having raised some children and getting them launched. And I think it's something that all of the schools, such as ours and yours, folks,
we should say that you started South Hills Business School.
In the early days of our school, there were many women who had started their families and had been to college and were ready to start a job again, but they were behind the times in terms of the computer generation, and we had to get them educated again. So I just wanted to bring that up to these folks to say to them that we must not forget that every 20 or 30 years we have to re-educate a whole lot of people. And I think we're not only in need of doing that now, but to continue with doing it for the younger generation. And I certainly am hoping that we can restart what we used to call a re-entry program at our school, which is South Hills.
South Hills Business School, yes.
Oh, I'm so happy. I'm so happy
Thanks for your call.
that Mrs. Mazza called, because she and her husband started a school in State College that is a model for a career and technical school. They were very close to the labor market. They changed when they needed to. And I still remember talking to Mr. Mazza, who's now deceased, and he said that it was built on two kernel things. One is that we're going to respect you, and the other is we expect you to work harder than you ever have, and we're going to connect you. And they brought that kind of love, if you want to think of it, to this process. And they've been very successful in getting people into the workforce, into good jobs, in an area where we have this big university right in front of us here, so they were very able to compete. Great job. I'm so happy to hear.
Yeah, thanks so much for calling. I wanted to talk a little bit about the cost of an education, and you talked earlier about, students shifting from one major to another and doing this and working and coming back, and I was astounded at first of all, how much more it costs, obviously, if it takes you 6 years to get a 4-year baccalaureate degree, or for those who don't go full-time, they are more inclined to not finish school, and often with thousands of dollars in debt.
Yeah, markedly different success rates for those who go
full-time versus part-time.
Part-time versus full-time. You may see as low as a 30% completion rate of those who are going part-time, and not just. I mean, at any school. Yeah, it's harder when you're sitting there saying, I've got a baccalaureate degree may have 40 different courses, and if I'm having to do them one at a time, that's 10 years of work. Yeah. Where if you're going full-time, it's 4 years. And so, yes, it is markedly different completion rates. And so we encourage our students, and I think it's incumbent upon us in terms of really good academic advising, is to make sure that they have that full load, a balanced, a manageable load, so that they can move through. And it's incumbent upon us to do good curriculum work to make sure that we're lining those courses
and to make sure the courses are available so you can conceivably get through a 4-year program in 4 years.
But it's a tightrope, Patty, because you have on one hand the need to persist and also get through this program. On the other hand, you may be a working single family,
and you have to work, yes.
Single parent family, and you need to work. There's no way that you're going to be able to incur that debt, and you need to work this off. So there are really lots of opportunities. There are lots of other ways to win and to get to the job quickly. One of the, schools that provide direct career training, and also schools like proprietary schools, even though they've been, there's been a lot of controversy about the for-profit schools. One of the things that happens if they work well, like the South Hills Business School, is that they lower the amount of time for training. Okay, they don't have 4 years. They may provide training that leads you to a job in 6 months. So that decreases what we would call the opportunity costs of going to school. While you're going to school, you're not earning. The quicker you get out of school with the skills that count, that's good.
I thought it was interesting, too, to note that a high-tech welder can start at a higher salary than an engineer.
Oh, absolutely.
That's astounding to me,
Absolutely.
and I think a surprise to many people.
It's not unusual to see a student coming out of with either a certificate or an associate degree in welding earning $70,000 to $75,000 a year. And and that's not a bad starting wage for investing 2 years in college.
It's a good ending wage.
Yeah, it surely can be. But that's true in a lot of applied technology. Many of our associate degrees will average, $45,000 to $50,000 in their first, and these are in that first year of earnings. And so it's not unusual to see that. And it's nice to see those students who become very self-sufficient. Immediately after launching. So it's nice to know that they're not going to go back to their mom's basement within a few years.
I should have followed up with you, David, when you your last comments, because oftentimes students are taking more than 4 years to get out of school, not because they're a single parent and they have to work, but it's a lifestyle decision. They drop 2 classes and are only taking 11 credits, and the cost of adding those 2 years to the ultimate cost of a college education is astounding.
Yeah. Well, it's also something we found out that not many young people think about. We just had a really good presentation to our Penn State Commission for Women about student debt. And a lot of people enter into student debt without really reading the major promissory note that they have and when it's supposed to be paid back and the terms under which. And so a lot of people, it's, mañana, it's sometime in the future. And that, of course, is not good financial planning for education either. So you got to have that side of it in mind. But, there's a huge mix of what people do, what people can afford, what kind of risk they're willing to take with their debt and the like. So a lot of ways to go on this, and as I say, it's kind of a tightrope. Do I spend time going to school and invest in that, or do I work at the same time and extend my period of training?
Student debt right now is actually higher than credit card debt, which is astronomical.
Yeah, it's right now. I heard 1.32 trillion. I'm not sure how many zeros are after that. I haven't counted that up lately.
Too many to count. Yeah. But it's important to be able to pay that debt off. So it's important that whatever career path you choose, that you're going to be able to move pretty quickly into that job that's going to allow you to, because those payments start coming due 6 months after graduation. And so I want to make sure that my students are earning a paycheck that's going to put them in a position to pay that.
And actually, all of us care about student debt for a number of reasons, because if you're paying, if your student debt is $600 a month, this may keep you from purchasing a house and doing other things that have this ripple effect throughout the economy.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, it forestalls the opportunity to engage in all the things that adults who've had a career and the like can do.
So there are, from what I'm reading, something like 5,700 different opportunities for post-secondary education, and I'm just wondering how we select who ought to be going to a traditional 4-year college. Who might be better off at South Hills Business School? Who would be better off at Penn College of Technology? What questions should we be asking to zero in on the right decision?
We need to be able to, we need to expose our students to all the different alternatives much, much earlier. And we need to get them involved in that. And by involved, I mean we need to let them experience a little bit, to get their hands dirty, to see. We have a lot of folks who may think they may want to go into medicine or into one of the healthcare, but once they get into that situation and realize they don't like blood, and so they're having to shift. Well, if I'd seen
Find that out in 9th grade
exactly.
when you're a candy striper.
And then I'm going to make a more informed decision, and then it's not tracking, it's letting that student find their passion, to find what's going to be right for them. And so it's important for us to take those middle schoolers, to take those students in junior high, and give them that exposure to a broad array of opportunities to study.
Dr. Passmore?
Yeah, Frank Parsons, back in 1909, who's considered to be the father of career counseling, said that there are 3 things you have to do. Now, it sounds simple, but these are really profound. One, you have to know yourself. The second, you have to know about jobs. And the third is you have to make a good decision to match the two. That's still true, but still hard. Okay, and I just wanted to, for people out there who are thinking about what to do next. I mean, you hear all of us talking about all the risks that are involved, but what do you do? Well, one way you could do this is you could find out, for instance, the Occupational Outlook Handbook is an available way to kind of think about how occupational projections are translated into things. But I think beyond that, since we know there's so much change, you really have to be careful about thinking about the future. Remember, you've seen, all of us who are sitting now in the last 4 or 5 years have seen tremendous technological change. That's going to change the content of work tremendously. You want to be positioned so you can leverage that, not be damaged by it.
I think of the transportation industry, and some of our transportation industry may be automated. There may be no one behind the wheel, and this will change all kinds of jobs.
Rio Tinto, which is a big mine, an iron mine in Australia, actually has automated trucks, automated drilling equipment, and they're getting ready to have an automated train that takes the iron ore 300 miles to the coast. Very few people involved.
In the transportation industry is changing. We have, I think, time for another phone call. We've got Ken calling us from State College. Ken, with a little bit of time, what's your question, please?
I have two questions. How many students enrolling at Penn State as undergraduates really don't belong there because they're too immature and don't have a good idea of what they want to do? And has Penn State done any studies dealing with the actual value, monetary value provided to four-year undergraduate students balanced off against their cost of education?
Great question. David Passmore.
Well, I can't speak to the number of students who shouldn't be at Penn State at this point, but we do know that in all college situations, both from Penn College and others, there's usually a lot of remedial work that needs to be done. Okay, and also, the universities are going to be pushed more in the future to account for outcomes like employment and income.
All right. Unfortunately, we are out of time. Thank you for your question, Ken. Sorry we couldn't answer more completely. Thanks to our guest, Dr. David Passmore, Distinguished Professor in the Workforce Education and Development Program at Penn State, and Dr. Paul Starkey, Vice President for Academic Affairs and Provost at Penn College of Technology. Thank you all for watching and listening. We hope you will join us next month when our conversation will be about pediatric cancer. For all of us here at WPSU, have a good night.
Support for Conversations Live comes from the members of WPSU and from
Dick's Honda, serving central Pennsylvania for 3 generations with quality Honda vehicles, service, and parts. On West College Avenue, State College, and at dickshonda.com.